on behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth, I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
Former US President Donald Trump has blasted Vice President Kamala Harris for her Democratic National Convention speech. The Republican presidential candidate attacked Harris as part of a live thread on Truth Social for everything that Donald Trump claims Harris did not mention. And here's what Trump said shortly after Harris finished her speech. She did not mention China, she did not mention fracking, she did not mention energy, she did not mention meaningfully Russia and Ukraine. She did not mention the big subjects of the day that are destroying our country. That is what Donald Trump had to say. Now remember, Kamala Harris began her speech with special focus on her middle class upbringing and how building the middle class will be the defining goal of her presidency. She also attacked Donald Trump for his tax hikes and promised a middle class tax cut.
Compare that to Donald Trump, because I think everyone here knows he doesn't actually fight for the middle class. He doesn't actually fight for the middle class. Instead, he fights for himself and his billionaire friends. And he will give them another round of tax breaks that will add up to $5 trillion to the national debt. And all the while, he intends to enact what in effect is a national sales tax, call it a Trump tax, that would raise prices on middle-class families by almost $4,000 a year. Well, instead of a Trump tax hike, we will pass a middle-class tax cut that will benefit more than 100 million Americans.
But Donald Trump has retorted saying, and let me quote again, there are 60 million people in poverty in the United States under their watch, and she doesn't even talk about them. Remember, most of Donald Trump's attacks have hinged not just on Ms. Harris, but the entire Democratic government in the United States that Donald Trump claims has failed the United States. This is what he had to say. No specific programs, all talk, no action. Why didn't she do it 3.5 years ago? Now, during the speech, Donald Trump referred to Harris as a radical Marxist and said that she stands for incompetence and weakness while the country is being laughed at all over the world. Harris has called Donald Trump an unserious man in her speech and said, and let me quote, "The consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious." She's also gone on to say how he would use the immense powers of the presidency of the United States. That's the question that she had posed. Not to improve your life, not to strengthen our national security, but to serve the only client he has ever had, himself. That is what Kamala Harris said for Donald Trump.
In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious. Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails, and how he would use the immense powers of the presidency of the United States. Not to improve your life, not to strengthen our national security, but to serve the only client he has ever had, himself.
Now, we all know that Kamala Harris was clearly referring to the favorite line of attack by the Democrats, which is that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. Now that both conventions have come to a close, the election heads into the final stretch with just nearly 3 months until the presidential election. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are set to meet in their first debate on 10th of September in Philadelphia, which will be hosted by ABC News.